listening to the Up and Under podcast, starting in 3, 2, 1.
Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome into the Up and Under podcast. I'm your host, Hani. Joining me, as always, it's Zeeshan.
Yo.
Alright, man. We have finally made it to the end of the regular season. And, man, it's been a long season, a lot of ups and downs. But we are here, and we're finally here to talk playoffs. The playoffs are just around the corner. I think maybe a couple of days for us at this point. The play-in is actually still currently going on. There's still one matchup left for the play-in tournament per conference. But, yeah, for the most part, the playoff matchups are set. So, in this episode, we're going to be giving you guys our first-round predictions for both the East and Western Conference playoffs. And, man, especially in the Eastern Conference, the playoffs has really shaped up to be pretty exciting. Like, I'm pretty excited for this year's playoffs.
This year's playoffs are about to be good. There's a lot of matchups which are toss-ups. And, you know, there's a lot of compelling storylines, a lot of young players now in the playoffs, kind of signaling the new generation within this NBA framework.
Especially in the Western Conference.
Exactly. And so, yeah, man, this playoffs is going to be good for sure.
Yeah, man, we got a lot to cover. But before we even get started, if you haven't already done so, subscribe to the show for all the great content. We're going to be continuing to bring you guys playoff content and, of course, some of our end of regular season content as well. So definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, so you never miss an episode from us. So, without any further ado, let's jump right into the Eastern Conference predictions. And the first round matchup is between, we're going to start off with the number 1 seeded Miami Heat taking on the 8th seed, and at this point, we don't know who that will be, but it will be between the Cleveland Cavaliers or the Atlanta Hawks. Now, for the Miami Heat, they are the number 1 seed in the East, and despite injuries and, you know, players in and out of the lineup, they were still able to secure the seed, and with how much competition there was at the top of the East, it was a dogfight to get it there. They finished with a 53-29 record, 5th in defensive rating, 10th in offensive rating. You know, this Miami team, we called it from the offseason since when they were formed, that this was going to be a good team with Kyle Lowry, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. Then you factor in guys like Victor Oladipo, Tyler Herro had a breakout season once again. Max Strus, like they have some great guys off their bench and starting for them. And not to mention Eric Spoelstra, one of the best coaches in the league right now. Not even right now. He's been one of the best coaches in the league. And yeah, this Miami team is really, really good, you know. But then when you're talking about the playoffs, you know, first and foremost, Miami's a championship caliber team. Like, this is a team that's built to win the playoffs. They have guys and veterans and Lowry and Butler who's been there, done that. They have good role players, good coaching. They have a good bench system. So Miami, I'm not really too worried about the Miami Heat right now, you know. When you flip it over to one of their potential opponents, now Cleveland, if it is going to be Cleveland, now Cleveland's definitely going to have the size advantage versus the Miami Heat, especially, you know, up front with Jared Allen.
Well,
and
if
Evan
Jared
Mobley.
Allen plays.
If Jared Allen plays. But either way, Evan Mobley, Lowry Markkanen, they have a lot of size in this Cleveland team. Not to mention Cleveland finished 7th in defensive rating, which is pretty impressive considering the fact that we didn't really expect much of Cleveland this year, and the fact that their defense is already this established with an unorthodox combination of players, let's be real, is pretty impressive, not to say the least. But the weak spot for the Cavaliers is their offense. They are 20th in offensive rating. And as I mentioned earlier, the Miami Heat are 5th in defensive rating. So Miami can really play defense, and it might be a struggle for the Cavaliers to score on this Heat defense, especially with how aggressive they are and, you know, just the schemes that Coach Spoelstra was able to come up with.
Well, Cleveland, first of all, Cleveland, I think they've had a successful season.
Oh, yeah.
They've had a successful season, right? This has been a feel-good story for them. Darius Garland has really broken out as a true all-star. I think he's going to be a perennial all-star just based on the way he plays. He's very good. Like, watching him, 3 or 4 times we watched him this year play the Raptors, he is very, very good. Again, it depends on when Jared Allen comes back, if he comes back, if they even make it out of the play-in spot. But yeah, Evan Mobley's being a Rookie of the Year contender. Jared Allen's being really good. But, you know, like we said, the Miami Heat are a championship contender, and this should be a very easy series for them if they face the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, but flipping things over, let's say the Atlanta Hawks win the play-in game. For the Atlanta Hawks, they're obviously the 9th seed. They beat the 10th seeded Charlotte Hornets, which we kind of expected at this point. Now Atlanta,
Charlotte basically pulled the exact same thing they did last year.
pretty much.
They did the exact same thing.
Well, I mean, their team was pretty much exactly the same, minus a couple of guys. But regardless, the Atlanta Hawks, we know they can score. You know, Trae Young has proven that he can score the ball. He's also, I think, what did he was one of the tops in score, like in terms of total points scored and total assists.
No, he led the league in total points and assists this year.
Yeah, so
I think the first time since like the 80s or something. He's very good. He's very, very good.
He's had a good season, and he's a good player. Now, the Hawks are second in offensive rating, but they're 26th in defensive rating. And as we all know, defense wins championships. And ultimately, the Atlanta Hawks don't have a defense capable of playing playoff-style basketball. Now, they have some good individual defenders, like DeAndre Hunter, someone who I really like. Onyeka Okongwu, still a rookie, but again...
second-year player?
Second-year player, sorry. But again, still young and still growing. So... the Hawks are going to have a tough time on that end of the floor.
Well, one underrated thing about their offense is that their offense seems to collapse every time Trae Young comes off of the floor. And like I've seen that firsthand every time I've watched the Atlanta Hawks. They seem to not be able to survive at all without Trae Young.
And speaking of Trae Young, like I think he's going to have a tough time if they do play the Heat, because the Heat play a very aggressive style of defense, which is not conducive for a Trae Young style of offense. Like he's not a guy who likes being, roughed around and knocked off his spot. Now, yes, he'll draw some fouls, but in the playoffs, the whistle gets a little bit tighter. They're going to be cracking down on some of those egregious, dramatics that some players do. So, and then not to mention, he's going to be guarded by one of the best point guard defenders in Kyle Lowry. So, ultimately speaking, the Atlanta Hawks, they might be able to sneak a game off the Miami Heat, but either way, no matter which one of these matchups the Heat will get, we think the Heat will take care of business relatively quickly. So if Miami plays Cleveland, we think Miami will sweep Cleveland. And if Miami plays Atlanta, they will win in 5. So that was the first matchup. Bringing us into our second matchup. Now, this is probably one of the hardest series to predict right now. It is between the number 2 seeded Boston Celtics taking on the number 7 seeded Brooklyn Nets. Now, on a personal note, I really hate both these teams. So for me, I am happy they are playing each other in the first round rather than playing the Raptors. But that's just a personal
Listen, man, all Atlantic Division teams hate each other.
Pretty much.
And that's what makes the Atlantic Division great, because we all respectfully hate each other.
Unless you're the Knicks. Nobody really respects them. But either way.
Listen, I don't think Knicks fans will disagree with you on that.
They can't, especially when I was right. But either way, the Boston Celtics, after a horrible start to the season, we were having fun with it, but they had a really bad start to the season. I guess since the start of 2022 has had one of the biggest turnarounds of any team this season. And
I think they've been the best team since 2022 started.
Bro, they have had an amazing turnaround. They've jumped to the 2nd seed in the Eastern Conference, which is very impressive. 51-31 record. More importantly, defensively, man, they're 2nd in defensive rating, and their defense is for real. Like, you're talking about, not only do they have Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum can defend, Jaylen Brown can defend. Then you go out and get a guy like Derek White. Daniel Tice can be useful defensively. You got some pieces. Time Lord, I think is he hurt right now? I think.
Well, Time Lord is a big X factor because he is arguably like a top 3 defensive center in the league. However, we don't know how much he's gonna play, if he's gonna play. There's basically nobody knows right now. Yeah. So Time Lord is basically the big X factor in the series.
But either way, then you got guys like Al Horford, who he's pretty decent defensively. The Celtics have a great defense. Then on top of that, they're 7th in offensive rating, which again, Jason Tatum has been playing at an All NBA level. Not to mention, again, Marcus Smart, I just mentioned him, but he's playing at a Defensive Player of the Year candidate level.
Well, Marcus Smart, the one underrated thing about his offense this year is he's really upped his playmaking. He's been a very good playmaker for them this season. His shooting has gone a lot better as well. And so, when you're factoring that into the playoffs, the scouting report was always, leave Marcus Smart open, let him handle the ball because, that'll lead to Celtics failure. But this season has been the opposite, especially in 2022, where he's really helped the Celtics offense as well.
Yeah, and then, on top of just having that guy, I mentioned Jaylen Brown. Not only do these 3 guys now all have playoff experience, they're all better players than they were in previous seasons, but now the Celtics also address their issues that they had heading into the trade deadline. Like, they didn't really have a great center rotation. They addressed that by getting Daniel Tice. Didn't really have a great scoring punch off the bench. They went out and got Derek White. And these two pieces have really vaulted the Celtics into a very good spot in the East playoff spot. But moving things over to their opponent, which is the Brooklyn Nets. Now, it's kind of hilarious how the Brooklyn Nets ended up in the play-in situation. But let's be honest with you, like, this season has been such a up and down tumultuous year for the Nets that did it really surprise anyone? Not really. But then again, the Nets took care of the Cavaliers, won their play-in game, and they are now in the 7th seed.
Again, basically towards the end of the season, everyone at the top was trying to duck them. So that's one factor we have to consider as well.
Yeah. I mean, they're 11th in offensive rating, 19th in defensive rating, and this is all basically without Kyrie not playing the whole season, which is pretty impressive to say the least. Now, the Nets, I mean, there's not a ton I can say. They have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. If those two guys show up, which they did in the play-in game, I mean, they're going to be a tough out for any team, any of these top teams. Then you factor in that they got more shooting by adding Seth Curry at the deadline. They got an interior presence.
Pickup.
Yep, big pickup. Then they got an interior presence by getting Andre Drummond. And they could potentially get Ben Simmons. I know, Ben Simmons.
I don't think he'll play this.
I don't think he'll play, but there's a chance, according to rumors, he could play this series. So, again, on paper, the Nets might not look very good.
Well, especially, their depth looks suspect, but when you're running 6-7 man rotations in the playoffs and you have Seth Curry as, well, I don't know if he starts right now or not, but Seth Curry, Patty Mills has kind of had a bad 2022. But Patty Mills, we know what he can be in the big moments. Andre Drummond has been really good for them. He's been good this whole season, actually. Even a guy like, we hate Goran Dragic in Toronto, but, that veteran presence, big games, big moments, he shows up. So, I mean, the Brooklyn Nets don't really need too much from your depth pieces if KD and Kyrie are averaging 75 points combined.
And that's the big factor here is that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, if they show up, are going to be a tough matchup for anybody, which is what makes this series so difficult to predict because you have two good teams here. You have the traditional good offense, good defense for the Boston Celtics, well-coached, young stars. You have that guy. Or you have the super team with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving in the Brooklyn Nets. Now, this was a toss-up, but we are going to predict Boston is going to end up winning this series in 7.
Well, I think Boston, for the one thing, has better defense,
yeah.
Right? Brooklyn's defense is the one thing you can try to, point to as a weakness. One person who I think will play X factor for Brooklyn is Bruce Brown, because if he takes some more three-point shots, he's been shooting 40% from 3. It's just he doesn't take any. He takes some more of those shots in the playoffs, and he makes them, now you're talking about a whole different ballgame. He's also a great short role player. He does a lot for Brooklyn's offense in terms of playing that kind of Draymond Green kind of role for them. And then defensively, he's a short wing, but, he's like Draymond Green, can play a lot bigger than his size. So Bruce Brown, I think, is a big X factor for this Brooklyn Nets team, but I will agree with the fact that I think Boston takes this just simply because they're the better team on both sides of the ball. But again, if Brooklyn wins it, KD, Kyrie, you can't really do much.
I mean, it's painful for me to say Boston wins anything, but you know what? They can get to the second round in this case if they beat Brooklyn. Moving us on into the third matchup of the East first round, and it is the Milwaukee Bucks, the third-seeded Milwaukee Bucks taking on the sixth-seeded Chicago Bulls. So for the Milwaukee Bucks, the defending champs are back in the playoffs. They've had a pretty good season all year. Not that we didn't expect anything less, considering they brought back almost the exact same roster as last year. They added a couple of nice pieces at the deadline. They're third in offensive rating, 14th in defensive rating. Giannis is still at an MVP level, and it's scary. He can still get better.
Giannis is basically having the LeBron issue where voters just don't vote for him for anything anymore because they're just tired. He's just too good.
But he's very good, man. And if he gets, again, the jumper is coming. We're getting scared now, man. The jumper is coming for Giannis. But yeah, again, the Milwaukee Bucks, solid team. Chris Middleton and Jrue Holiday. Jrue Middleton. I don't know where that came from. But either way, Middleton and Holiday, good complementary pieces for Giannis. Then they brought in a guy like Serge Ibaka. Him and Brook Lopez are a good center rotation for them. So I mean, Bobby Portis is still there. I mean, so the Bucks they brought back their same roster as last year, but they're still a very good team, especially when you're factoring in how good Giannis is and the fact that they can dial up the defense because their defensive rating I think is low.
Well, again, they were injured as hell.
Exactly, they were injured as hell. So think about it. Imagine they were healthy. I would expect them to have at least a top 10 defense.
And again, that was basically they played the whole season without Brook Lopez. The few games that he came back for at the end, he looked like regular Brook Lopez, which is scary for every other team because, if he does what he does, which is spacing the floor on offense, well, that's his brother. I
know, but I love that celebration so much.
But yeah, if he spaces the floor on offense, he gets those 1 or 2 post-ups a game, which he's still one of the best post-up players in the NBA, in my opinion. And then defensively, he plays, all defensive caliber defense. Then the Milwaukee Bucks are basically banking on the fact that they're just going to replicate the season they had last year, which is a very real possibility.
Yeah. So that was the Milwaukee Bucks. Moving us into the Chicago Bulls. Now the Chicago Bulls, it depends on how you look at it. I think they had a pretty good season considering where they are in their rebuild and how the pieces they brought in, some of them kind of worked.
Well, I think all of them worked, to be honest, but it's just, again, it points to the fact that I think people got carried away when they were the first seed, when they had a very easy schedule in the beginning of the season, and people were like, oh, they're the first seed. Well, I mean, first of all, nobody predicted them to be, higher than like the 6th seed, right? And so when they're the 6th seed, I think they conformed with the expectations, I would say.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, they're 13th in offensive rating, 22nd in defensive rating. The Bulls can score. That's the big takeaway for me with the Chicago Bulls. They can score. DeMar DeRozan has had an amazing season. He's probably going to get All-NBA's honors. Rightfully so. Zach LaVine is still a great player. Nikola Vucevic, we know how effective he can be. Plus, again, Alex Caruso is back from injury, so is Patrick Williams. So that should help their defense a little bit more. But the big thing with the Chicago Bulls is the fact that this season they have basically not won any of their big games against any good opponent this season, which is pretty alarming considering if you want to be a good team, you have to beat other good teams.
I mean, it's not even that the fact that like they lose against good teams, it's the fact that they can't even win a game, basically. They couldn't even win. They won, I think, maybe like 1 game against Boston in the beginning of the season when Boston was trash, basically.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they couldn't even win a game. And towards the end of the season, they were just getting blown out left and right. Like, they were terrible in 2022, especially down the stretch of the season. DeMar DeRozan looked back to normal. Zach LaVine, again, has also been injured, so that doesn't help. And then the unfortunate thing is, saying this as a Raptors fan, you have to watch DeMar DeRozan in the playoffs because basically every single season it's a different story for regular season DeMar versus playoff DeMar. Now, when he was with the Spurs, he looked better in the playoffs, but I'm not at a point where I can trust playoff DeMar, unfortunately.
Well, he can't be your number 1 guy. And that's something that we know very well as Raptor fans, that DeMar DeRozan cannot be a number 1 guy in the playoffs. And we're just going to have to wait and see. But honestly speaking, the Bulls didn't look great heading into the playoffs. And then you factor in they lack a lot of experience. Like, besides DeMar, Vucevic, and Caruso, those are the only 3 guys who have actually been in the playoffs, and 2 of those guys have barely been out of the second round.
Vucevic hasn't.
Vucevic had it. DeMar's only done it once. And Caruso just did it a couple of years ago. But again, it's not a lot of experience on this team. So for that reason alone, and also, who's going to stop Giannis? Who the hell's stopping Giannis right now?
Yeah, nobody.
Nobody's stopping Giannis. So
not to mention, I mean, you put Caruso on, let's say, like Drew Holiday. Who's getting Chris Middleton, right? You're asking DeMar or Zach LaVine, 2 negative defenders, to go on Chris Middleton.
Yeah.
Not to mention, you have the worst pick and roll defender in the league in Nikola Vucevic, arguably, and it's gonna be a disaster for the Bulls.
Yeah. So pretty much our prediction is Milwaukee's gonna win this in about 5. I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to 6, but again,
I don't think so. Again, I think the Bulls are good enough, talented enough to get 1. Like, DeMar goes off for a game, Zach LaVine goes off for a game, Vucevic actually makes his shots for once. So maybe they can go 5. To be honest, I'm leaning more towards a sweep in my opinion.
I'll give them the I'll give Milwaukee the gentleman's sweep. Bringing us into the final matchup of the East first round, and arguably the most important one for us. The 4th seeded Philadelphia 76ers are taking on the 5th seeded Toronto Raptors. Starting off with the Philadelphia 76ers, because we saved the best for last. The Sixers, they have a lot of pressure on them heading into this playoffs. Not only just the playoffs, but this matchup in general. Because remember, the Raptors are kind of the reason that the Sixers, blew apart a couple of times. But yeah, the Sixers have really tried to rework their roster. I mean, they ended up losing the season series to the Raptors anyways this year. But yeah, there's a lot of pressure on the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, they finished the season, they were 12th in offensive rating and 12th in defensive rating. Embiid, he won the scoring title, which is the first big man to do it since Shaq, which is pretty impressive. And he's an MVP candidate. So Joel Embiid has had a great season, amazing season for him. Now, the Sixers, they went all in trading for James Harden. However, he hasn't really been as advertised. Like, when you're talking about a guy, you're trading for James Harden to be that second star for Embiid, he really hasn't been that. And that's a bit of a concern, especially considering the fact that Daryl Morey's pretty much staked his whole reputation on this trade. And the Sixers have staked their entire plan for the next few years on James Harden. So if this doesn't work, if they end up blowing it or losing in the first round, like, it is not going to be a good look for not only for James Harden, but the Philadelphia 76ers as a whole. So that's another thing. Then you factor in Doc Rivers. He's a notorious playoff choker, and he's not really a great adjuster in the playoffs.
He made the top 15 coaches of all time list. Like, that is a disgusting act by the NBA.
Yeah, and like, how many game sevens has he blown?
Listen, bro, we all know at this point that he didn't even, like, he's not even the reason why. Listen, he took arguably the greatest talent, one of the top 3 greatest teams of all time in the 2008 Celtics, and he basically had to go 7 every single series, right? And not to mention the fact that we all know that he basically wasn't responsible for that title. It was Tom Thibodeau. That was basically Tom Thibodeau's title, right? We all know that. So, and, aside from that, you look at his playoff history, absolutely terrible.
Yeah, pretty much. But, so yeah, Doc Rivers, again,
the doc versus the nurse.
Yeah, that's not gonna go very well. We all know the nurse do more. But anyways, and then you're factoring in a guy like Matisse Thybulle, probably your best defender besides Embiid. He can't play in Canada because he decided to get one vaccine, but didn't decide to get the other, and now he can't play in Canada. Like, all you need to do is get one more shot. You're gonna play in Canada.
I mean, here's the thing about Matisse Thybulle. I think one thing that gets underrated in this series is the fact that the 76ers offense has looked terrible against the Raptors with Matisse Thybulle. If you remove him, I think that frees up the offense a lot more.
Well, now
that's one thing that I think a lot of Raptors fans are missing with the fact that Thybulle won't be playing in Canada. It's the fact that I think the 76ers offense will be a lot better when they're playing in Toronto.
Well, because then that opens up space now. Now you can throw, instead of throwing Matisse Thybulle, throw a guy like Tobias Harris in there. Now that's more offensive firepower in there. Or they throw in a guy like Furkan Korkmaz.
Well, again, it's probably going to be Danny Green in his
Maybe
place,
Danny Green, yeah.
Right? But again, Danny Green, even if he doesn't make his shots, is him standing in the corner is still a floor spacer.
Exactly. So, again, the Sixers, they have a lot of pressure, but that doesn't mean they're not a good team. They can be a good team. The James Harden can show up. But again, we all know playoff Harden is real. And, it's not...
In Harden's defense, I will say his playmaking is still elite.
Yep.
He's still a great playmaker. And then also, for the 76ers, the reason, why they should win the series is because they have the best player in the series, period.
Yep.
Right? They have the best player, hands down, by far, in the series.
Yeah, for sure. But, moving on to more important things, the Raptors are back. After a rocky start to the season, the Toronto Raptors are back in the playoffs where they belong. And... honestly, this took us by surprise too. Like, we got the 5th seed, for crying out loud. How the hell did we do that? Because with that, damn good.
Because we won against all the good teams, and of course we lost against all the bad teams. Bro, I do not want to see Detroit ever again. Please do not let us play Detroit.
Bro, if we won 2 of those games against Detroit, we'd have a 50-win season.
And the game that we got blown out by Orlando too. That was terrible.
Man. Yeah, the Raptors are a fun team. But either way, the Raptors finished the year with 14th in offensive rating, 10th in defensive rating. Pascal Siakam, he has been the story for the Raptors.
Pascal NBA Siakam.
Yes, he has been playing at an All-NBA level. He should be All-NBA. If he is not All-NBA, I swear to God, Adam Silver hates Canada. Like, I swear to God. Like, the guy has been playing so well. He got snubbed from the All-Star game. I'm still going to say that. He got snubbed, regardless of what you say. But Pascal has been great this season. He's been continuing his play. And not to mention, he's been doing it against the best players in the league. You know, he's been dominating guys. He's been going at Embiid, going at Giannis, going at all the best players in the league, and he's been putting up great numbers. Just been great all around this season. Then you factor in Fred VanVleet. Now, he's been a bit banged up since the All-Star break, but we all know Fred, when he shows up, Fred can, you know, really come through, especially in the playoffs, which he's done before. And, you know, Fred with some rest, he's been an all-star this season. So those two guys alone, and you factor in the experience they have, they're going to be pretty good in this playoffs. Then you factor in the reason why Joel Embiid calls the Raptors his worst team to play against. Because the Raptors have a lot of length and size, you know, and athleticism. They can throw all that at Embiid. They can switch. They can throw different looks at him, and makes things really difficult for Joel Embiid, despite the fact that the Raptors do lack size, especially down low. Like, our biggest guy is, 6'11" maybe? But when you factor in, you can be guarded by Thad Young, Kem Birch, Precious Achua, who's been really good. Then you can be guarded by Scotty Barnes or OG Anunoby or even Pascal.
Well, again, nobody's going to be playing one-on-one against Embiid, right? That's the thing. The Raptors, I think, are maybe the best help defense team in the league, right? So you factor in the fact that, like, everyone on the Raptors has, like, a 20-foot wingspan. Embiid is getting swarmed all over.
Even Harden. Like, Harden hasn't been able to get by even Precious Achua.
And that's the big factor of the series, right? The Raptors offense, it will struggle at times, as we've seen it do. But the Raptors are banking on their defense being able to limit Philadelphia, especially guys like Tobias Harris, who's not had a good reputation in the playoffs. I think for the Sixers, the main X factor for them is Tyrese Maxey. You know, he's an inexperienced guy. It's only his second season. But he is very, very good. Yeah. And if you're getting peak Tyrese Maxey, that's what really swings the series in favor of the Philadelphia 76ers. And then for the Raptors, I think the two X factors I would say are Precious Achua and Scotty Barnes. Philly is going to dare Precious and Scotty to kill them on offense. And we're going to have to see if they can actually do it. Because, again, this is basically their first playoff experiences for both of them.
If they unleash Scotty Barnes to become an all-time scorer and defender, it's game over. We just won. Like, I'm sorry. Scotty Barnes has been great this season. He should win Rookie of the Year. Precious Achua, man. Like, this guy, he's had me worried a lot this season in a lot of moments. But, man, the flashes, his shooting has gotten so much better, especially after All-Star break.
Yo, he got better right after he looked off Desmond Bane for that shot.
Yeah, exactly.
It's literally night and day.
Yeah.
But yeah, Precious probably gonna be the main defender on Embiid. He's gonna be defender number 1 on Embiid.
But the Raptors are getting OG Anunoby back, which is great news for the Raptors to take care of other guys like Tobias Harris or even James Harden. So, and then Nick Nurse is the Joel Embiid whisperer. Let's be real.
Well, Nick Nurse versus Doc Rivers in general, to be honest.
Like, it's a mismatch. Nick Nurse is clearly the better coach here. But if we had to predict this series, now everyone's torn on this series. But you know what? We're gonna go for it. Raps in 7.
Hey man, we got to listen. Ideally,
we're playing with house money
again. For the Raptors, like, even if they lose the series, it's all right. Like, all the pressure's on the Philadelphia 76ers. So for them, they should be winning this in 6 or 7. Like, they have to.
Philly should win. Like,
max, to be honest, like, not even 7 games. Like, Philly should win in 6. To be honest, they should. This is what is supposed to happen. But again, for us, watching these teams match up in the last 2 games that they did with Harden there, I would say, like, man, the Raptors can really inflict some damage on the 76ers. So I think, you know, that's why we're picking the Raptors in 7. Again, if we're wrong, we're wrong. It's all right. Raptors had a good season either way.
Listen, this was a homer pick, but you know what? Got to go for it.
But yeah, like, Philly fans are the ones that should be really worried because this is all the pressure's on them. And there has been some worrying signs. And again, even if Philly advances past this series, this series is going to take a toll on them. And so moving forward into the playoffs, it's going to be tough for the 76ers in general.
Oh, yeah.
So that was the Eastern Conference. Flipping things over to the Western Conference, we're going to have the first matchup, which is going to be the one-seeded Phoenix Suns versus option A, which is the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, the Suns have the best team in the league. I think nobody really doubts that, to be honest. They went 64-18, the best record in the league. They have the fourth best offensive rating, third best defensive rating, and they're number one in net rating. So they are very damn good.
They're the best in the league.
The Phoenix Suns also have a lot of depth. Like, they have multiple 3-and-D guys that they can throw against the Clippers and their wings. For example, like, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, Jay Crowder, Torrey Craig are all guys you can throw at guys like Paul George, Norm Powell, Rocco, Terrence Mann, Marcus Morris, Batum, Kennard, etc.
Do we know if Kawhi's playing? If they make it?
No, he's not playing. I'm 99% sure he's not playing. The Suns also have a great offense. Mainly their pick and roll. Chris Paul, setting guys up. The pick and roll with him and DeAndre Ayton. Devin Booker has been amazing this season. He should make an All-NBA team. I don't know if he will, just because of how much competition there is. But, I think I would have him on my All-NBA teams. And they're just a very good shooting team in general. I talked about the 3-and-D guys. Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson are two of the best corner shooters in the league, especially Cam Johnson, versus the Clippers' 24th ranked offense. So, again, this is a mismatch on the offensive side of the ball. However, this will be, I think, a competitive defensive series. You're talking about the third best defense in the Phoenix Suns versus the eighth best defense in Los Angeles. With, good coaching on both sides. Monty Williams is a great coach. Ty Lue has really turned around my opinion of him. He's shown that he's been a good coach. I think in Cleveland he had some issues. But, again, he was also a rookie head coach in Cleveland, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But, in Los Angeles, he's been really good for them. Players have always talked about how he's one of the best adjusters, series adjusters, which is a big contrast to his predecessor and Doc Rivers, who basically confirmed that he did nothing during that Denver series where they blew a 3-1 lead. So, again, not to make this long or anything, but the Suns' offense, I think, is just a lot better, and that will be the determining factor. And, again, the Los Angeles Clippers are good enough to get maybe one game. Paul George can go nuclear. We all know that. Norman Powell's been very good. So, again, the Clippers, Ty Lue, good enough to get, I think, one game. But overall, the Suns, I think, will win this in 5.
Yeah, it's just not really. Again, the Clippers, without Kawhi, this is a good building spot, especially if you add Kawhi to the pieces that they have now. This is actually going to be a pretty good team next year. But this year, especially if Kawhi doesn't play, the Suns are just way too good.
And then talking about the other option, the other matchup that is available, should the Clippers lose their playing game against the New Orleans Pelicans, we're talking about the Suns versus the Pelicans. Now, I think this is an even more lopsided matchup than the Clippers one. Like I said, the Suns have the best team in the league. The Pelicans are bottom 12 on both sides of the ball. They're 19th in offensive rating. I think 21st or 20th in defensive rating. So they're not good on either side of the ball. Though, again, that is mainly with CJ McCollum not being there yet, right? A lot of those numbers are based on that. The Pelicans have some nice players. I think they have a good building block going forward, especially if Zion actually commits to this team and he actually gets healthy. So they do have some nice players moving forward. In this series specifically, I think those players will make the series at least competitive in the games, even if my prediction is that the Suns will sweep the Pelicans. But I think the games itself will be competitive each game. The Pelicans have CJ McCollum. Herb Jones has been really good as a rookie. He has all defensive caliber potential.
Yo, shout out my guy Jose Alvarado. Yo, that guy.
Hey, everyone loves Jose Alvarado, bro. BI, he just came back. He's been really good as well. Jonas Valanciunas, he's also been very good for the Pelicans. So the Pelicans have some nice individual players who can make, I think, each game in this series very competitive. But in terms of, the deciding factors, I think the Suns are just too experienced, too playoff savvy, and they're just too talented to lose those end of game situations. And for that reason, I think the Phoenix Suns will advance in a sweep in 4 games.
At least the good news is for the Pelicans that they finally did something and they're actually playing meaningful basketball. So that's actually a good thing for the Pelicans. But again, you said it. The Suns are just better up and down the roster, so they should win this series easily.
Moving on to, I think, the most intriguing first-round matchup in the Western Conference this year. We're talking about the 2-seeded Memphis Grizzlies versus the 7th-seeded Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, the Grizzlies have the 5th best offensive rating, 4th best defensive rating, and 4th best net rating.
Biggest surprise team of the year, I think. Is
Yeah, definitely. While the Wolves have the 8th best offensive rating, are good for 13th in defensive rating, and 10th overall in net rating. Now, starting us off with the Memphis Grizzlies, they're a very good overall team led by a superstar in the making in Ja Morant. They went, I think, 20-3 without Ja, something like that. So that means they're a very good team overall. They have a lot of depth. They're good on both sides of the ball. They play well, even with Ja on the bench. Like I mentioned, they have an insane record without Ja. So if those few minutes that Ja needs rest in the playoffs, the Memphis Grizzlies won't fall off a cliff without him. And so I think that really negates the Wolves' advantage when you're trying to, for example, claw back in games or make games competitive without Ja Morant on the floor. If you're the Minnesota Timberwolves, now you're going up against a team who's won basically all their games without Ja Morant. So it really does play a factor. The Memphis Grizzlies, like I said, they have a lot of depth. They have a good supporting cast around Ja Morant. Jaren Jackson Jr. has been, he's really turned it around this season. He's had his first healthy season, I think, basically for his whole career. And you've seen what he's done as a result. He's been a defensive player of the year caliber player. And, his front court partner, Steven Adams, has really, really changed this Memphis Grizzlies team. I talked about previously in another episode, his screen setting, his playmaking has really opened things up for the Memphis Grizzlies on the offensive side of the ball. Exactly. Defensively, he's been a good rim protector, and he's probably been the best offensive rebounder in the league this season. He's been really good on the glass. Then you talk about Dylan Brooks, who's
the heart of the team.
Yeah, heart of the team. DeAnthony Melton's a great bench player. Desmond Bane is arguably the most improved player of the year, I think.
Yeah.
And then, Tyus Jones, who's like the quintessential bench point guard player. Like every team needs a Tyus Jones on their team. And so the Memphis Grizzlies are very good, I think. The T-Wolves are coming in with a lot of momentum, though. They just won their play-in game. Patrick Beverley is going to try to make life miserable for Ja Morant, and he's going to do his best. I think, listen, man, I talked about how much I love Patrick Beverley.
Yo, I think Pat Bev might get teed up out of a playoff game.
Hey, listen, the Memphis Grizzlies are a very big trash-talking team, and the Minnesota Timberwolves are a very fiery team led by Patrick Beverley, right? So this is going to be a very fun matchup. I think there's going to be a lot of trash-talking. There's going to be a lot of technical fouls, some flagrant fouls. It's going to be a fun series, man.
Listen, I'm proud of the Minnesota Timberwolves. I have dogged on them for a lot of years, especially in the Tom Thibodeau era, but you can't blame me for that one. But seriously, like, this is meaningful basketball. This is actually building off a rebuild and not just staying stagnant. So congrats to them for actually making it to the playoffs and winning their play-in game. Like, it's impressive.
It's been a huge turnaround for them. I think you have a direction finally moving forward.
Shout out Chris Finch of the Nick Nurse coaching tree.
Yep. Shout out Chris Finch. He just got his extension as well.
Well, rightfully so, deservedly.
Malik Beasley is basically hit or miss. But if he's on target and he's playing well, he is a very good shooter. A somewhat decent defensive player when he wants to play. I think Naz Reid is one of the better backup centers in the league, and he showed what he can do in that play-in game. He really played well for the T-Wolves off the bench. Jared Vanderbilt, Jaden McDaniels, two very lengthy defensive guys. Jared Vanderbilt really changed their season around when Chris Finch put him and Beverly into the starting lineup. I think that's what really, got the T-Wolves season turned around. And then D'Angelo Russell, we know what he can do at his worst, and then we also know what he can do at his best. It's the question of which version of D'Angelo Russell are you going to be getting this series. We saw what he can do in the play-in game. We saw what he did in the playoffs with Brooklyn. We've also seen his low moments, particularly last season in Minnesota, his stint in Golden State, where, he just doesn't really do anything that well. So if you're getting the playoff D'Angelo Russell, which, the version that played in that play-in game against the Clippers, that could really make the series even more interesting. When we talk about the stars, Starting off with the Minnesota Timberwolves, Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, he's a great offensive player, and he is the determining factor for the Minnesota Timberwolves in the series. How well is he going to be able to play against good defenders in Jaren Jackson Jr. and Steven Adams? Now, I think the one thing is that Steven Adams generally struggles with perimeter-oriented players, and Karl-Anthony Towns is the best perimeter big man in the league, I think. And so,
I mean, he won the 3-point contest.
Exactly. And so if you're talking about Steven Adams guarding Karl-Anthony Towns, I don't think that's going to probably work as well as Memphis hopes it will, which is why I think Jaren Jackson Jr. will draw the assignment against Karl-Anthony Towns. Now, flipping things over, Karl-Anthony Towns has been terrible defensively, as is the story with his career. And so that's one thing that the Memphis Grizzlies will be able to attack with John Morant. Those pick and rolls, him going downhill against Karl-Anthony Towns, is going to be barbecue chicken alert. Right? It's going to be terrible. He's also had some playoff issues, right? We just saw what he did in the last playing game. Hopefully, he does not pull a playoff choke again, because that's going to really hurt his reputation. Yeah. Anthony Edwards,
my guy.
Anthony Edwards, this is his first playoffs. He's inexperienced. Again, his first taste of playoff action against the Clippers, he performed very well. He's also, the thing with Anthony Edwards is, number one, he's inconsistent, which, again, granted, second-year player. But he's also being injured for the whole second half of the season, which is why you've seen a drop in his percentages. His knee has really been bothering him. So I don't think that bodes well for the Timberwolves this series. And he can, again, like I said, he can definitely play well offensively. But he will be swarmed by guys like DeAnthony Melton and Desmond Bane.
But he definitely has the potential to go off. And he's one of those guys who doesn't shy away from the moment. So he can play a big factor.
Exactly. John Morant, we talked about him. Good offensively, amazing will player. Attack Karl-Anthony Towns downhill. Amazing finisher. However, he will be hunted defensively on the other end, right? D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards are going to be hunting for John Morant defensively. And we've seen with John Morant on the court, Memphis's defense dropped significantly. And again, that's because everyone has to try to cover for John Morant. And when we know in the playoffs, matchups are exploited. Right? Teams try to run the whoever offense, as Chris Moose says, in the playoffs. And so John Morant will be hunted defensively, so he's going to have to make up for that offensively. His playmaking, I think, will be key. Getting guys like JJJ involved, Desmond Bane, all the other guys. And he also lacks playoff experience, which is, I think, one thing that will hurt them, even if they do advance during the course of this playoffs. I think that will rear its head at one point or another in the playoffs. And then Jaren Jackson Jr. is co-star. He's good on both sides of the ball. He has fouling issues still, but again, when the games are more physical in the playoffs and refs are not calling as many fouls, I think this issue can be mitigated. He's going to have to play both sides of the ball because, as I said, he's probably going to draw the assignment against Cat. And like John Morant, like his teammate, it will, playoff inexperience will be a factor for him. Overall, though, I think this will be a very fun series. There will be a lot of mistakes within the series, too, I think, because these are both two young teams who all their stars have basically never played in the playoffs. However, I think Memphis is just the better team on both sides of the ball. Yeah. They have more talent. They have more depth. Taylor Jenkins has done a great job with this team, so shout out Taylor Jenkins. I think this will be a competitive series, and I am saying I think Memphis Grizzlies in 6.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Grizzlies are the better team. If we're going to compare the two, the Grizzlies have just been better all season long. So they should take care of this. But this is going to be a fun series for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be a very fun series, I think. Moving us into the 3 versus 6 matchup, which is the Golden State Warriors and the Denver Nuggets. Golden State Warriors are 17th in offensive rating, number 1 in defensive rating, and they're 5th in net rating, whereas Denver is 6th in offensive rating, 15th in defense, and 12th in net rating. Now, Denver, they have the MVP, right? They have the reigning MVP, Nikola Jokic, who is putting up another insane season, averaging 27, 13, and around 8.
He carried them to the playoffs himself.
Yeah.
That's impressive, man.
No Jamal Murray, no Michael Porter Jr. Nikola Jokic is just, in my opinion, he's the best big in basketball.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, if maybe second best if Giannis is technically a big as well. So I think he's the best center in the league, in my opinion. He's improved his defense tremendously. Offensively, we know he's one of the greatest players offensively. He will have to, again, carry the offense versus the Golden State Warriors, who have the best defense in the league. So it'll definitely be a challenge. I don't know how much help he's going to get with Aaron Gordon, Monte Morris, Austin Rivers. Will Barton has been, terrible at times. Bones Highland has been a feel-good story, but, again, playoff inexperience. This is his first taste of playoffs. So Nikola Jokic will have to carry the offense. He's going to have to score a bunch of points. He's going to have to playmake. Again, he's the best playmaking big man of all time, in my opinion. And he's going to have to show those skills against the Golden State Warriors, who have a very good defense. But, yeah, he's going to have to be asked to do a lot. Like, a lot. And especially with Golden State targeting him on the other end, which they will do with, Steph whenever he comes back. The Denver Nuggets basically only have Nikola Jokic to rely on. And speaking of Steph Curry, when we're talking about the Golden State Warriors, everything basically depends on Steph Curry. Nobody knows when he's going to come back.
Although they are optimistic.
They are optimistic, but maybe he misses 1, 2, 3 games. We don't know. Nobody knows. And so everything basically depends on him. Now, Klay Thompson, his co-star or his backcourt partner, has looked good down the stretch. But again, a lot of the teams that he was playing weren't even in playoff position, were basically tanking. And so he hasn't really been tested that well throughout the season. When he came back, it was kind of looking rough for him, which granted, he hasn't played for 2 years, so I don't really mind that. But Klay Thompson will be tested, I think, this series. And if not in this series, moving forward down the line in the playoffs for sure.
I think Klay is an X factor in the series because I think him with his ability to get red hot at any given moment, even though he's coming back from injury, like if this guy catches a rhythm, we know how dangerous he can be. So Klay Thompson's a player definitely to watch.
And again, at his peak, he's an all defensive caliber player.
Oh yeah,
but that defense isn't really there right now.
I mean, Klay's also a very clutch player too.
Yeah. So Klay Thompson will be X factor. Draymond Green has still looked amazing defensively, hence the number 1 rating, defensive rating for the Warriors. He's still been amazing defensively. But without Curry on offense, he's looked really bad. Now, when you have Curry into that lineup, then Draymond really looks good because his playmaking flourishes. He knows what he's doing on offense. That IQ just really shows. But without Steph Curry in that lineup, he has really had a tough time offensively. And he's not 2016 Draymond where he's going to be putting up 15 points a game. Right? He's not going to be doing that anymore. Wiggins, which version of Wiggins are you going to get? He maybe could be a good two-way player against this Denver team.
I think Wiggins disappears way too much. Like, I saw the Warriors actually play in person, and I just felt like Wiggins is there in the beginning and then just kind of fades away, And that's something that, again, now it could be covered up if you bring Curry back and Thompson starts playing the way we all know he can play. But it is something to keep an eye on, the fact that Wiggins does tend to disappear,
Yeah. And the biggest X factor in the series is Jordan Poole. The biggest X factor. Jordan Poole has been amazing all season. He's averaging 19 points a game on around 36% from 3. And that's on like 7 attempts or whatever it is from 3. So he's been very good for the Warriors. Definitely a candidate for most improved player of the year as well. He plays very well off of Draymond, as does basically everyone else, right? He gets a lot of shots from Draymond's screen and roll actions, his handoffs. He fits very well within this offense. He meshes very well. His playmaking has gone better as the season progresses, and he's been, tasked with playmaking duties more often in the absence of Curry. He can also pick up the slack if Klay is struggling, right? Which is a huge if in this series. I think Klay will have his moments of struggling in the series, just coming off of injury. And the main thing is Jordan Poole will be asked to fill in for a lot of Curry's scoring duties, playmaking duties. And that's going to be the biggest thing for Jordan Poole. Now, again, if Curry comes back, then Jordan Poole gets to take that secondary option. And I think we could see Jordan Poole really flourish in that role. But without Stephen Curry, Jordan Poole will be asked to do a lot offensively. The main thing is, though, like I talked about with John Morant, Anthony Edwards, whatnot, is the inexperience factor, right? This is basically Jordan Poole's first playoff series. And so, how will he respond to the added pressure, especially by guys like Bones Highland? He's not that great of a defender, but Austin Rivers really, Mike Malone's turned him into a pretty solid defender. Monte Morris, Aaron Gordon, Denver has some capable defenders who will try to make things tough for Jordan Poole. How will he respond with the playoff adversity, the playoff physicality and just the playoff pressure in general.
I mean, Jordan Poole's had a pretty good season, but I'm not really, like, I think the inexperience, I don't really trust him in big situations much yet. Like, I think he's good when things are loose and everything, nothing's really tightened on him. But once the pressure starts to come up, I don't know how well his decision making is going to be. Now, that could be different when you have guys like Curry, Draymond. You have other guys who can cover up for some of your mistakes, but it's the playoffs, and you need everyone to be at their best. And I don't know how much you can trust Jordan Poole to do that.
And to be honest, I think with or without Curry in the series, this series will still probably go 6 games. I would say Golden State in 6 games. Curry, I think, could make it faster, but I think even with or without Curry, like Nikola Jokic is good enough to get a couple games on his own. The Denver Nuggets have a solid enough team to, I think, make things difficult for the Warriors. But I think it will be, an interesting series for sure. And then the final series, we're talking about the 4-seeded Dallas Mavericks versus the 5th-seeded Utah Jazz. The Mavs are 15th in offensive rating, 6th in defensive rating, and 7th in net rating, whereas Utah they have the best offensive rating in the league, the 9th best defensive rating, and the 3rd best net rating. Now, everything for Dallas basically depends on Luka's health when he comes back. However, right now, it does not look good. He'll probably at least miss a couple games from the series, if not more. There's other sources that have said that he might just miss the series in general. So, everything for Dallas, like I said, basically depends on their best player in Luka Doncic, because without him, guys like Spencer Dinwiddie and Jalen Brunson are going to be asked to do a lot more in terms of playmaking and scoring duties. Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith are going to be asked to score a lot more. You don't have Tim Hardaway Jr. right now, which is a big thing for Dallas as well. So obviously, without your best player in Luka Doncic, things really get wacky for the Dallas Mavericks. Reggie Bullock, like I said, Dwight Powell, Dorian Finney-Smith all get less opportunities to shoot the ball just because they don't have an elite playmaker like Luka Doncic feeding them the ball. So, those guys will get less opportunities, which means, less shots, which means more rust on those shots, more pressure on those shots to make those shots. And we know what happens with the role players in the playoffs. It can get really difficult for them.
Yeah, without Luka, it's very tough to see the Mavs really doing anything, because he's the team, man. He's the engine of this team, man. And without him, it's gonna be very tough.
Again, Dallas has the best player in the series with Luka Doncic, but without him, they don't even have the top 2 best players in the series. Even if Luka Doncic comes back, though, he'll still be injured, because he's definitely, if he comes back, it's going to be rushed.
He won't be 100%.
Right? He won't be 100%. So he'll still be injured. Now, again, his game doesn't rely on explosiveness, but shooting requires a lot of leg work. And if your legs are not 100% when you're shooting, your percentages are not going to be that great.
Especially with the load Luka carries.
Exactly.
You can risk further injury, which is not a good thing to do.
The Mavs are not the greatest depth team, and, like I mentioned, there's inconsistency problems with the rest of the team. Spencer Dinwiddie's been great since he got there, but Spencer Dinwiddie in the playoffs, that's a different story, right? I don't know how he's
Has he even been to the playoffs? I don't even think.
He went once, I think, in Brooklyn. Or maybe, I don't even know if he played that
I don't know if he played.
I think he did. He was, I don't know. But yeah, like I said, inconsistency problems, depth problems with Dallas. Utah, on the other hand, has basically been dysfunctional this season. I think Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert, ideally will be split in the offseason. I think Quinn Snyder's definitely out of there. Reports indicate he's gone after this season.
I think things have just been stale in Utah. I think things have just been the same for the last 4 or 5 years, where they really haven't gotten really anywhere. And the fact is that you have a generational talent in Donovan Mitchell, but. Listen, man, he's a talented guy.
Yeah, but that's been the problem with the Utah Jazz. Donovan Mitchell's been terrible for them. Like, let's not cut it anyway. He's been terrible for them, especially in the second half of the season. He's a main reason why they've been losing games, blowing games left and right. They've had the most, I think, leads that have been blown this season. Donovan Mitchell is a huge reason why. He's basically a shot chucker who has not been clutch at all, and especially does not give the ball to Rudy Gobert at all, despite the fact that Rudy Gobert shoots damn near 70% at the rim. The Utah Jazz have nobody except for Mike Conley who can get Gobert the ball, which is a big reason why he gets, quote-unquote, played out of games in the playoffs. Which, again, if you actually look at it, is a false narrative. However, Rudy Gobert does not get utilized correctly on the offensive end. And Donovan Mitchell is a big reason why. Now, again, Donovan Mitchell has the propensity to play big games in the playoffs, to go off in the playoffs. But the problem is, when you look at his overall body of work, it hasn't been great. Besides those few games where he gets hot, the rest of his games have been very inefficient. He doesn't play any sort of defense at all. His playmaking is not the best. His decision making is not the best. And if he's not making his shots, what is he doing for the Utah Jazz? Which has been basically the biggest problem with them this season. I talked about how, the lack of defense around Rudy Gobert, but like the Utah Jazz, Rudy Gobert is basically asked to carry the defense on a historic level. Like he's been asked to, the amount of carrying he has to do for this Utah Jazz team is on a historic level. They have no defenders aside from him. Daniel House, okay? Like, oh my God, Daniel House, Like Rudy Gobert is being asked to do a lot, which is why I want to see him on a different team, actually get proper opportunities on the offensive end, and actually be helped on the defensive end and not be a one-man show.
The problem is moving that $200 million contract is going to be very hard to do. So I don't know how Utah's going to pull that off. But
yeah. Listen, man, Utah, I don't think they're doing anything this playoffs. But for this series specifically, they have the two best players in this series without Luka Doncic and Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell. They have superior depth. They have the better overall team, definitely offensively, with Mike Conley, who's not been as great this season. Bojan Bogdanovic, I already talked about Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Rudy Gay, Daniel House.
One underrated fact is Joe Ingles is out for the year. So if he was
Joe
here,
Ingles isn't even on the team.
Oh right, he got traded.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I completely forgot about that.
So yeah, like Utah, for all their dysfunction, this series they should be able to take the series. I have them taking it in 6 games. One thing is Dallas, unlike the Clippers last season, they don't have any dribbling wings who can punish Rudy Gobert on closeouts effectively on defense. So, yeah, I don't think Dallas is going to be able to play Rudy Gobert off the floor the way the Clippers were able to do so last year. And so, yeah, like overall, Utah just has a better team.
Yeah.
Now, moving forward, I don't think Utah's going to be doing much of anything. But for this series, at least they extend their playoff lives, I think. And take out the Dallas Mavericks in 6 games.
Yeah. So those were our Eastern and Western Conference first round playoff predictions. Let us know what you guys think. Do you agree or disagree with us? Definitely going to be a lot of disagreements. But again, it's going to be a very exciting playoffs here. But we hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. Definitely subscribe to the show on all the various platforms. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher Radio, and of course YouTube. Definitely subscribe so you don't miss a great episode from us. Also follow us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at UP_N_podcast, Facebook.com/UP_Podcast for all the latest updates whenever we post a new episode or reaction to news as they occur. So definitely check that out. Also, check out our website, UP_Podcast.com. It's our central hub for the show. It's a place where we write blog posts with every single episode. So if you don't have to listen or watch the full episode, you can read about it on our website. So definitely check that out. We also made some revamps on the site, so definitely check those out as well. And yeah, man, playoffs are here. Playoffs are starting within a couple of days, and things are about to get very, very exciting in the basketball world.
For sure.
But with that, that concludes this week's episode. We'll see you guys on the next one. Take it easy.
Easy.